know I'm not no punk. You know, number one, I mean, the whole bottom line is I had a blanket of love in prison because I'm real. I mean, if I had walked in prison with some kind of uppity attitude, if I had walked in prison thinking that I was this or I was that, which...
Ever heard Super Freak or Give It To Me, Baby? Well, the guy behind those hits was quite the character. Rick James wasn't just a funk legend. He was a walking, talking whirlwind of controversy, drama, and pure chaos. From dodging the draft to rocking the charts with Motown, his life off stage was almost as wild as his music. We're talking drugs, legal messes, stormy relationships, and a whole lot of scandal. Let's dive into the life of the man who turned funk into an unforgettable roller coaster.
We were 11 months apart, so we did everything together. My mother dressed us alike.
Rick James was born as James Ambrose Johnson Jr. in Buffalo, New York, and his life was basically chaos wrapped in talent from day one.
We were growing up, Rick always had an interest in music.
He was always banging on glasses with spoons and stuff. He couldn't stop moving. He was always trying to express what was inside it.
He jumped into music super young, trying out a bunch of different bands as a teen, switching up sounds like he was changing outfits. But let's just say Rick wasn't exactly playing by the rules. When his rebellious streak got a little too real, he signed up for the Naval Reserve to dodge the draft. Classic Rick move, right? Energy.
Rick's mother was astonished that Rick was so energetic as a kid. She did take him to a doctor to see why he was running around so much. The doctor didn't know what to tell her. He said he didn't think it was a mental illness.
Rick's big plan to outsmart the system totally backfired when he went MIA from the Navy. Long story short, he got kicked out and hit with a desertion charge. Trying to hit reset on life, he headed to Toronto and started a rock band called the Minor Birds.
Well, Rick's stay in Canada was the real beginning of his career.
They were actually killing it and even landed a deal with Motown. But just when things were looking up, Rick's past caught up with him. The military swooped in, slapped him with an arrest, and his rock star dreams took a hard pause. Rick wasn't about to let a little drama slow him down. He came back to the U.S., linked up with Motown's Gordy Records, and finally had the stage to bring his wild ideas to life. His first album, Come Get It, was straight up fire, mixing funk, soul, and rock in a way that felt totally fresh. Tracks like You and I and Mary Jane put him on the map fast, proving he knew how to drop unforgettable hooks and lyrics that turned heads.
I sing, and when I'm feeling low, she comes as no surprise, turns me on with her love, takes me to paradise.
Rick hit the jackpot with his album Street Songs, and it took him straight to the top. Leading the charge was the banger Super Freak, a track so addictive it was impossible to ignore. That groove? Unmatched. It blew up everywhere, making Rick a certified legend in funk. The album also brought us Give It To Me, Baby, proving he wasn't just a one-hit wonder. Street Songs wasn't just music, it was a whole moment, locking Rick's name into the Hall of Fame. We'll come back to that, the legend of Rick James's music. Let's talk about other parts of his absolutely fascinating life.
And I'm talking about albums that sold millions of copies. Every album we did, we never failed to have an ounce or two sitting right there on the console.
Really?
A big bag of Quaaludes, okay? Cristal champagne and Jack Black bourbon, and all at our beck and command right there.
Rick may have been on top of the world, but his personal life was a whole different story. His biggest struggle? A crack cocaine addiction that turned everything upside down. It wrecked his health, dragged him into non-stop legal drama, and brought a lot of chaos that ended up overshadowing his music career. In the early 90s, Rick and his girlfriend Tanya Hijazi got caught up in a scandal that had everyone talking. They were accused of kidnapping and assaulting a woman named Frances Alley, with claims she was held against her will for days and subjected to horrific abuse. The charges were intense, everything from assault to false imprisonment and drug-related offenses. By 1993, Rick was convicted and sentenced to 3 years in prison. He got out on parole in 1996, but the whole ordeal left a lasting mark on his reputation. Rick's battles with addiction were no secret, and they definitely took a toll on his life and career. The drugs led to some seriously unpredictable behavior, putting a strain on his relationships with everyone around him, friends, family, and people he worked with. On top of that, his addiction kept dragging him into legal trouble, wrecking his image and throwing his career off track.
I don't think I've ever made an album other than for the last few years that didn't have cocaine, and I was snorting it. And we'd stay up for weeks making these albums, and we were doing like 3 or 4 albums a year.
Rick's life was as messy as it was iconic, with scandals that often stole the spotlight from his music. One of the most jaw-dropping moments? In 1991, he and his girlfriend Tanya Hijazi were accused of holding a woman, Frances Alley, captive for days, with allegations of assault, threats, and drug use. During his trial, Rick James acted like he couldn't care less. He even fell asleep in court and started snoring. The jury wasn't impressed, though, and he got slapped with a 5-year sentence. But, plot twist, he was out on parole after just 2 years in 1996. While locked up, Rick didn't waste time. He wrote over 300 songs and eventually took a stand against drugs. Talk about turning chaos into creativity.
I know I'm not no punk. You know, number one, I mean, the whole bottom line is I had a blanket of love in prison because I'm real. I mean, if I had walked in prison with some kind of uppity attitude, if I had walked in prison thinking that I was this or I was that.
Throughout the 90s and early 2000s, Rick kept finding himself in some seriously sticky situations. He faced tons of accusations of sexual assault and misconduct, and his autobiography, Glow, really spills the beans on some wild stories. We're talking drug-fueled parties, orgies, and other intense stuff. These revelations painted a pretty clear picture of a guy whose personal life was just as chaotic and over-the-top as his music. Rick's crack cocaine addiction just made everything worse. It fueled his bad temper and erratic behavior, landing him in even more legal hot water and public drama. His struggle with substances was no secret, and it seriously messed with his career and personal life. Between the drugs and all the scandals, he became known as one of the most troubled and controversial figures in the music scene.
Rick was my brother too. We hung out all the time, you know, and so one of the almost a prerequisite to being with Rick was to be high, you know. So we began high and hanging out and stuff like.
As if things weren't already chaotic, Rick dabbled in drug smuggling too, adding even more drama to his wild life. In his autobiography, he spills on his risky adventures in the smuggling game, equal parts dangerous and adrenaline-packed. Classic Rick, always living life on the edge. His love affair with cocaine wasn't just about using, it went way deeper. Turns out, he was into drug smuggling too, using it to bankroll his lifestyle and habit. In his book Glow, he spills about sneaking huge stashes of drugs across state lines. He played it cool, using his rock star status to dodge any suspicion. From hiding the goods in his tour bus to stashing them in his luggage, Rick made the chaos of touring work in his favor. But let's be real. This wasn't just about staying under the radar. It was a game of dodging both the cops and rival dealers. Pure adrenaline and chaos, just like the rest of his life. For him, smuggling wasn't just about cashing in. It was his way to stay stocked up and keep his addiction fed. The rush of sneaking drugs around, mixed with the non-stop grind of his music career, was like a ticking time bomb. It amped up the chaos in his already out-of-control world, making things even messier. He kept up the smuggling game for years, dodging danger at every turn, until his addiction and run-ins with the law finally caught up to him. His legal drama kept things just as messy off it. After that infamous case in the early 90s that landed him behind bars, Rick found himself tangled up in one legal mess after another. A major headache for him, fighting over money. He constantly clashed with record labels and managers, convinced he was being shortchanged on cash from his hits. Royalties and contracts became battlegrounds, with Rick arguing he wasn't getting what he deserved. These never-ending disputes didn't just drain him. They made working relationships in the music biz even more strained. As if battling record labels wasn't enough, Rick had former bandmates and collaborators coming for him too. They hit him with lawsuits over everything from unpaid checks to broken deals, airing out all kinds of professional drama. These back-and-forth legal fights didn't just drain his energy, they piled onto the chaos already running his life. Between the stress and the constant distractions, it made it even harder for him to stay on top of his music or focus on getting his life back on track. One of Rick's biggest battles was with Motown Records. He straight up called them out for allegedly holding back his royalty checks and ditching their end of the deal. This messy fight dragged on for ages, with both sides pointing fingers and telling totally different stories about what went down. The whole ordeal put a spotlight on just how dicey things can get between artists and their labels. It was another reminder of how tough it is for musicians to fight for their money and protect their work. Rick's run-ins with the law didn't stop at money drama. He racked up a list of criminal charges over the years, most of them tied to his chaotic lifestyle and drug habits. We're talking everything from assault to drug possession, and a few other messes in between. These constant legal setbacks didn't just land him in trouble, they cemented his rep as a super talented but seriously troubled star who couldn't seem to stay out of the headlines for all the wrong reasons. Even his love life was full of drama.
One day there was an article that came out. One of the things was, who's your favorite musician? It was like, oh yeah, Rick James.
That's what you said.
Huge.
Right.
Everybody loved Rick James. And the next thing I know, I get a phone call. And so that's how the friendship.
Rick's love life was just as dramatic as his career, with a lineup of famous flames that kept everyone talking. He had flings and relationships with some big names like Linda Blair, the Exorcist star, Elizabeth Shue, Catherine Bach from Dukes of Hazzard, and Tina Marie, his partner in music, and so much more. Out of all these, his thing with Linda Blair in the late 70s really stood out. They were both super famous and made headlines wherever they went. But behind the scenes, it wasn't all glitz and glam. Rick's drug issues and unpredictable antics stirred up plenty of drama. Even with all the chaos, their connection was real and stuck with both of them long after it ended.
He was just an amazing person, funny. Mm-hmm. A lot of comedians were around him. A lot of people don't realize how funny Rick was, and he was an amazing talent.
Tina Marie wasn't just Rick James's collaborator. She was his ride or die in the music world. They teamed up for iconic tracks like Fire and Desire, where their chemistry was so electric it practically set the stage on fire. Their relationship was this wild mix of mentor, friend, and lover, a little bit of everything. But, like with most things in Rick's life, it wasn't exactly smooth sailing. His struggles with addiction and erratic behavior brought plenty of drama to the table. Even with all the chaos, their bond in the studio stayed solid. And after their romance fizzled out, Tina still had nothing but love and respect for him, always giving him his flowers for the part he played in her career. Rick had a thing for whirlwind relationships, and his flings with women like Elizabeth Shue and Catherine Bach were no different. It was always high highs and low lows. His crack cocaine habit and fiery temper stirred up constant drama, making it hard to keep things steady. As his behavior got more unpredictable, his love life seemed to follow suit, with tension and legal messes piling up right alongside the passion. If you enjoyed diving into the wild, funky world of Rick James, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment below with your favorite Rick James track or the craziest story you've heard about him. Let's keep the funk alive because there's no party without Rick James energy. See you next time.